There is a painful yet liberating truth. It is when a person awakens not just in consciousness, but in the soul after years of being lost in wounds, sacrifices, and the subtle manipulation by someone they once trusted completely. This awakening rarely arrives gently. It crashes down like a psychological shock, a complete collapse of the illusion they had clung to in self-deception. It is the moment when the empath, those who always put others before themselves, suddenly realizes that their kindness could not save anyone. It only made them prey to those who thrive on control and manipulation. And it is in that darkest place that the first light begins to flicker. Not the light of love from others, but the light of truth, of courage to look inward and finally see, I deserve peace. In today's video, we will embark on that journey together. The journey of awakening, of resetting boundaries, and of rising from the pain of being manipulated by a narcissist. This is not an easy topic to hear, but if you've ever felt small, lost, or trapped in a toxic relationship without knowing why you couldn't escape, then this video may be your turning point. Be sure to subscribe and stay until the end, because what you're about to hear isn't just psychological analysis. It's a return to yourself. A journey you don't have to walk alone, and you deserve to hear the whole truth. The empath was not born to be broken, yet they are often the ones who suffer the deepest wounds. Because they love with their whole heart, they trust with their entire soul, and they forgive far beyond what most people can comprehend. They are not weak. In fact, it is precisely their strength that allows them to carry the pain of others without a single complaint. But that very strength makes them the perfect target for narcissists, those who do not know how to love, only how to exploit love. When an empath enters a toxic relationship, they don't see a trap. They see a wounded soul in need of healing, a restless heart that longs to be loved. And so they love fully, selflessly, with the hope that tenderness can mend the past, that patience can thaw coldness. But their love does not soften the narcissist. On the contrary, it gives them even more reason to manipulate, to control, to test limits, and push the empath to the brink of despair. A narcissist's manipulation is not a frontal assault. It's as subtle as smoke slowly seeping into every corner of the mind. One day, you no longer know why you're sad, what exactly you're angry about, or whether you really are too sensitive, just like they say. You begin apologizing for things you didn't do. You begin doubting your own intuition. You go quiet to avoid conflict. You shrink yourself to keep the peace. And slowly, you stop being you. But the scariest part isn't the manipulation. It's how you learn to accept it. You start calling it love. You excuse it because of their past pain. You believe that if you're patient enough, forgiving enough, they'll eventually change. But as the years go by, the only thing that changes is you. From someone full of love, you become a shadow of yourself, living to soothe their rage, to dodge emotional blows, to avoid being too much of a problem. And then one day you wake up. Not because someone came to save you, but because you hit the rock bottom of emotional exhaustion. You realize that no one is truly loving you. They're simply loving the power to hurt you without consequences. They love your submission, your silence, your unconditional tolerance. And you finally ask, why did I ever accept this? That's when a door opens. It's the truth. Raw, cold, but the only thing that can set you free. The truth that you are not weak. You were conditioned to believe that you were. The truth that you are not unworthy of love. You just gave your love to someone who never knew how to receive it. And most importantly, you cannot heal someone else by destroying yourself. Awakening is not like suddenly opening your eyes one morning and feeling free. It's a journey. A long, painful process filled with tears, anger, confusion, and sometimes overwhelming loneliness. But every step you take toward the truth is a step away from manipulation. Every time you say no, every boundary you set, every moment you choose yourself over pleasing others, you are coming back to life. You were not born to be a victim. You were born to learn how to see clearly and to rise. And the moment you choose truth over illusion, you begin the journey of a survivor, not as a victim, but as a warrior. A warrior without armor, without weapons, because true power lies in clarity, in the ability to look into the eyes of the one who once manipulated you without fear, in understanding that if you have to sacrifice yourself to keep a relationship, then it isn't love, it's bondage. The awakened empath begins to do something they never dared before they set boundaries. No more weak yeses, no more silent endurance, no more explaining to someone who never wanted to understand. Now every boundary they draw is a declaration I have worth. Every time they reject an empty apology is a bold affirmation. I am no longer afraid of being abandoned. And that is exactly what throws the narcissist into chaos. They don't know what to do with someone who no longer reacts. Someone who doesn't cry, doesn't beg, doesn't spiral from their words anymore. Because the silence of someone who has awakened is not weakness, it's a weapon. Their calmness drives the narcissist mad, because you cannot manipulate someone who sees through your game. When the empath starts seeing the truth, the narcissist starts to unravel. Their entire manipulation strategy depends on confusion, saying one thing, doing another, making you question yourself. But now you've seen the pattern. You know it's not a different way of loving, it's control. You were never too sensitive. They were gaslighting you. And when you start calling every tactic by its name, the illusion collapses. The awakened empath becomes a mirror reflecting the raw, uncomfortable truth. They don't need to call out the narcissist, don't need to fight with rage. Just existing in clarity makes the manipulator feel unsafe. They can no longer use you to stage their familiar drama. They can't define you, control you, or guilt you into compliance anymore. And to a narcissist, that is a devastating blow. But do you know the strangest part? Your clarity doesn't just terrify them, it haunts them. They may walk away, they may chase after someone else, but they will never be able to forget you because you were the first one who didn't fall for their tactics. You are not just an ex, you are the one who saw through them. This awakening not only saves you, it opens a new path. A path where you can love without erasing yourself. Where you no longer sacrifice for those who are undeserving. Where you learn to keep your compassionate heart, but no longer hand it to someone who only enters to break it. You don't need to become hard or cold. You just need to learn where your heart truly belongs. Emotional detachment is not coldness, it is salvation. When an empath has spent their life placing others' emotions above their own, learning to separate your feelings from the chaos around you is not avoidance, it's self-rescue. You no longer dissolve into someone else's rage. You no longer let their moods define your worth. You learn to stand apart, to observe, rather than react, to stay silent, rather than be swept away. This is the most silent yet powerful turning point. You stop explaining yourself. You stop diving into endless arguments where truth is always twisted. You no longer need to win a debate with someone who never plays fair. You understand that true victory lies not in what you say, but in what no longer affects you. And that conscious indifference, that healthy detachment, is what throws the narcissist into disarray. To them, you were once a source of emotional supply, a predictable reaction, a presence they could manipulate. But now you don't react. You don't spiral, you don't plead, you don't rage. You simply vanish in calmness. And to a narcissist, nothing is more terrifying than someone they can no longer shake. They need your reaction to maintain control. And when you stop reacting, you close their stage forever. This is the moment you go from victim to silent warrior. You don't need to scream to prove you've changed. Your peace is the answer. You don't need their recognition or apology because you're no longer waiting for it. You've realized something profound. Narcissists never apologize out of genuine remorse. They apologize to regain control. And you don't need that anymore. Intentional letting go is the highest expression of inner strength. Not letting go out of helplessness, but because you know your worth does not depend on someone else's validation. You don't need to restore the trust of someone who shattered it. You don't need to be understood because you finally understand yourself. And that is when you become free. Free from the cycle of effort and disappointment. Free from the illusion that love can heal someone who doesn't want to be healed. Free from the savior role you once carried so heavily in your heart. Now you no longer live to heal others, you live to nurture yourself. The narcissist may never change, but you can. And what they never expected was that you would rise strong, silent, without applause, only truth. When the empath walks away in silence, something strange happens. Not to them, but to the narcissist. That silence isn't just a physical absence. It's the end of an emotional supply, the end of a space they once exploited to feed their distorted ego. The narcissist doesn't face emptiness the way a normal person might. They resist it with everything they've got because beneath their arrogant exterior lies a terrifyingly fragile sense of self. At first, they deny it. They think you're just acting that you'll come back because you can't live without them. That's what they once made you believe, planting it like a curse in your mind. But then days pass. Weeks pass. You don't come back. You don't text. You don't respond. You no longer exist in the play they've been directing. And that's when panic sets in. There's no one left to blame, no one to dump responsibility on, no one to lash out at and then fake affection with. No one left to wear the victim mask for. No ears to listen to their excuses. No empathic gaze left for them to exploit. And so they crumble. But not to grow, only to sink deeper into delusion. They might try to replace you, but no one can replace the reflection you once held up. Because you weren't just a lover, a friend, a companion. You were a mirror of truth. When you were still around, they could shove you into the roles of too sensitive, too emotional, or always wrong. But when you disappear in calm, unshakable silence, they are left alone with nothing but the emptiness of who they really are. That's why narcissists are obsessed with awakened empaths. Not because they love them, but because they can no longer control them. They can no longer define them. You've become the one thing they can't manipulate, and that's something they cannot forgive. To them, losing you isn't losing a person. It's losing a tool for ego preservation. It's an existential crisis they have no idea how to handle. And then the games begin, the surprise messages, the accidental glances, the seemingly sincere apologies, the nostalgic memories brought back to life. It's not remorse. It's hoovering, a desperate attempt to pull you back into the same old game. They don't want love, they want control. And if you return, they'll replay the same patterns, only more subtly, more deeply, more dangerously. But you didn't go back. And that is exactly what triggers their most primal fear, being forgotten. Because the narcissist's entire ego is built upon the gaze of others. When no one is watching, that ego begins to unravel. When no one reacts, their power crumbles. When no one believes they're the victim, they're forced to confront what they fear most themselves. The most terrifying part isn't that you walked away, it's that you no longer need them. You no longer need their apology, their explanation, or any form of validation. You don't need closure. You've written your own ending through awakening detachment and self-love. And that, more than any revenge, is the deepest pain for someone who believed they were the center of your world. When the empath truly comes back to life, they don't return as they once were. They emerge as a version that never existed before, no longer living to please, to reconcile, to heal wounds they didn't create. They live with a new awareness that kindness is not silence in the face of injustice, that love never means self-erasure, and that compassion should never be exploited. They have walked through darkness, but not to be consumed by it. They have seen the raw truth of manipulation, the cruelty of control disguised as love, and they have moved through it not with anger, but with clarity. The clarity that says, I don't need anyone to prove I'm worthy of love. I have always been worthy. Their awakening doesn't shout. It doesn't need declarations. It shows in their eyes, in the calm with which they now face the things that once made them weep, in the way they walk, not rushed, not panicked, not looking back. They don't forgive as a way to return. They forgive to release, and they let go to be free. And that freedom is something the narcissist will never understand. They think you left to provoke change. They think your silence is reverse manipulation. They don't realize you're not playing the game anymore. You've stepped off the chessboard not to win, but to stop playing altogether. From the rubble of pain, you've rebuilt a new self, one that needs no approval, no understanding, no recognition from those who do not know how to love. And from that place, you begin to shine. Not a blinding light meant to attract others, but a steady, gentle glow enough to light your own way. And then, something miraculous happens. Others begin to see that light. Those lost in toxic relationships, those still doubting their worth, those trying to love someone who cannot love them back, they see you. They recognize themselves in you. And you become living proof that awakening is real, that freedom is real, and that healing is real. You don't need to become someone. You just need to be yourself, the version who rose from ruin, who washed away lies with tears, and who now walks with their own 2 feet. Every word you speak, every boundary you enforce, every time you choose silence over reaction, you are teaching the world one powerful truth. I am no longer so easily controlled. The narcissist will never forget you. But more importantly, you no longer need to remember them. No more searching for answers in them, no more hoping they'll change one day. Because you've learned the deepest truth of all, they don't need to change for you to be happy. You only need to walk away and never look back. You walked through the fire and you didn't burn. You survived the night and you never lost your light. You are not just a survivor. You are reborn. There is a quiet strength that only those who've walked through hell can carry. That silence is not a sign of weakness or fear. It's proof that they are no longer controlled by pain. When an empath has awakened, they no longer tremble at the narcissist's return, because they've learned the truth doesn't need to win, it just needs to be seen. The narcissist may continue their old games, hoovering fake apologies, strategic tears, recycled stories with a new disguise. But this time, the empath is no longer in the audience. There's nothing left to watch. They don't get angry, they don't feel sad, they don't react because now they've learned to respond with intentional silence. A silence loud enough to shatter every performance. You don't need to shout that you've changed your peace, says it all. When you're no longer pulled into emotional storms, you create a safe space for yourself. And in that space, truth becomes visible. No more illusions, no more what-ifs, no more, maybe they've changed, only clarity. And in that clarity, you no longer need them, not even their acknowledgement. That, to a narcissist, is unacceptable, because they live to be needed to control, to see themselves reflected in the eyes of others. And when you no longer reflect anything, they become invisible in the very world they tried to dominate. That's why, even after you've left, they remain obsessed. Not because you're special in the romantic sense they often pretend to admire, but because you were the only one who truly saw them, and still chose to leave. No fight, no begging, no loss of dignity. You walked out like a soul that had survived the fire, burned but not broken. And you know what the most miraculous part is? You start living a life where you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Not your worth, not your goodness, not your capacity to love or to understand. Because you know you were always enough. You were simply convinced otherwise. Every step you take, every boundary you set, every word you don't speak. It all becomes proof that you are no longer under anyone's control. You are now the author of your own story, no longer an actor in someone else's counterfeit script. And when you write with truth, you don't just liberate yourself, you become a light for others, still lost in the dark. No one can take away the journey you've walked. No one can erase your awakening. They might try to deny it, mock it, blur it, but they can no longer reach it. Because clarity never returns to blindness. Once you've seen, you cannot unsee. and once you've awakened, you can never go back to sleepwalking through life again. The final truth an empath comes to realize is this: no one can destroy you unless you hand them the key. And it is only when you take that key back, when you stop running and turn to face your pain instead of fleeing from it, that you truly step into freedom. Not just freedom to escape, but the freedom to exist in your truest form, unfiltered, unhidden, unapologetic. This journey is not linear. There will be days when you feel stronger than ever, like you've never fallen. And there will be days when a familiar voice, a fleeting memory, a once cherished look brings a tightness to your chest. But that's not failure. That's part of healing. No one walks out of darkness without carrying a few scars. But you know what makes all the difference. That now you don't use your scars to beg for love anymore. You use them to remind yourself, I survived. The awakened empath no longer lives to fix others. They live to love themselves fully, healthily. And in doing so, they become a lighthouse for other souls still lost at sea. They don't preach. They don't try to save anyone. They simply exist, and their existence, whole, authentic, and powerful, becomes a healing force on its own. In this world, people like you, those who were once shattered by the wrong kind of love, but chose to rise with a heart that remains soft, you are the ones who change the world. Not with loud declarations, but with your sincere, unwavering presence. The narcissist, will they continue their cycle? They will seek out those who are easier to control, easier to manipulate. But you are different now. You've learned that peace doesn't come from making others happy. It comes from no longer sacrificing yourself for someone else's chaos. From today on, you no longer need anyone to validate your worth. You don't need anyone to look at you in order to feel lovable. You don't need anyone's apology to start healing. You are the healing. You are the light. And if someone is still listening, still doubting, still unsure whether they'll ever make it through, let me tell you this. You won't go back to who you used to be, but you will become someone better, truer, brighter. And no one will be able to dim that light ever again. And if you're still here, quietly listening until the very last moments, you know what that says so much. It tells me you are already on your own awakening journey. You may not have reached the end of the road. You may still feel lost, still feel weak, still wonder if you're strong enough to break free. But trust me, if you can sense that something is wrong, if you can feel the conflict deep within you, if you can start to ask questions, then you've already begun. Awakening is not one big sudden moment of clarity. It's a series of small, quiet choices you repeat every day, choosing truth over illusion, choosing yourself over pleasing others, choosing to walk away instead of holding on. And every time you make those choices, you are healing. No path looks the same. No awakening journey is easy. But you are not alone. On this channel, we will continue speaking the truths that so many are afraid to say about toxic relationships, subtle manipulation, and how you can live, love, and exist without losing yourself in the process. If you see yourself in these words, if you've been broken but never gave up, if you're searching for a place to be seen, to be understood, and to walk this path with others, hit that subscribe button. Stay with us. Because here, we're not just telling the same old story. We're rewriting a brand new chapter together. One where you are the main character, no longer the victim in someone else's script. Turn on notifications. Share this video with someone you know who needs to hear it. Because maybe, just maybe, the quiet beat of your heart is the loudest call to awakening someone else has ever heard. You are enough. You have always been enough. And you deserve to live a life no longer ruled by fear, but led by the light that already lives inside you. We'll see you in the next video, where truth, courage, and freedom always have a voice. And you know something. There is a special kind of peace that only those who have walked through hell can name. It's not peace that someone else gives you. It's not the fake quiet that comes from burying everything. It's the deep stillness in your soul where every wound has been seen, every lie has been exposed, and no pain holds the power to define you anymore. Because after everything you've learned, one powerful truth: you don't have to forgive to be free. You only have to let go. Not letting go of the narcissist, not letting go of the memories, but letting go of the false belief that you have to suffer to be lovable, that you have to endure to earn love, that if you just change enough, sacrifice enough, shrink enough, then someone will finally see you. No, they won't. Not because you're not enough, but because they simply can't. Because the distortion in their soul blinds them to anyone but themselves. And you once waited for that as if it were a miracle, when in truth, you were the miracle all along. Now you no longer need anyone to call you strong to believe you're not weak. You don't need anyone to label you a good person to believe you have worth. You only need yourself, whole, clear, unapologetic. And perhaps the most beautiful thing is this: you've begun living not out of fear of being abandoned, but out of love for yourself. A love that isn't flashy, doesn't require recognition, doesn't demand reciprocation, but runs so deep that a narcissist can never reach it. It's the kind of love that allows you to walk calmly through old shadows, smile, and keep going. Because now you understand. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't making them regret it. It's no longer caring whether they do or not. You live, you breathe, you smile, not to be seen, not to prove anything. You live for you. You have awakened, and no one can ever lure you back into that false dream again. Looking back, you realize this journey was never just about leaving someone. It was about returning to yourself. No one enters your life by accident. Even the one who shattered you played a role. They were the awakener, not through love, but through betrayal. They didn't come to heal you, but to reveal a wound that had long been buried. A wound they didn't create, a wound born from your belief that you had to become someone else to be loved. And then you discovered true love doesn't require you to disappear. No real love asks you to shrink, cut off pieces of yourself, or live in fear that a single misstep will be punished with silence or coldness. No genuine love makes you feel like the villain in your own story. You used to think forgiveness was the pinnacle of healing, but now you understand the real pinnacle is not needing to forgive, because you no longer carry hate. You're not trying to punish anyone, not because they deserve peace, but because you deserve freedom. You once thought forgetting was necessary, but now you know you don't have to forget. You just need to remember without hurting. Remember without wanting to go back. Remember without the urge to fix, to cling, or to start over. Remember it like a scar on your skin, neither ugly nor beautiful, just real. And because it's real, it makes you stronger. You once tried to understand the person who hurt you, hoping that understanding would soften the pain. But now you understand some things don't need to be understood, only accepted. Accept that some people don't come to love you, they come to teach you to love yourself. Accept that some wounds aren't meant to be healed, but to teach you to stop handing others the knife. Now you don't need to fight to prove anything. You are the proof. You are living proof that one can survive lies, strategic silence, and backstabs disguised as love, and not only survive, but become radiant. You may no longer be who you once were, and that's a beautiful thing. Because the old you believed they needed someone else to feel whole. The you now knows you were always whole. You just forgot. You're no longer lost in the night. You are the light. Not a spotlight that demands attention, but a quiet, steady flame forged through pain, betrayal, and rebirth. That light doesn't come from outside. It was lit from within the moment you dared to admit you were wrong to believe in the wrong kind of love. And once you become the light, the darkness no longer scares you. You used to run from it, trying to erase the memories, the wounds. But now you've learned to sit with it, talk to it, and eventually make it your companion. Because it was in the darkness that you finally found yourself, no longer defined by others, no longer too sensitive, too nice, or too vulnerable. Just you, in all the depth you once felt ashamed of. The narcissist survives on reflection. They need someone to mirror back their illusion. But you shattered that mirror, and you no longer reflect what they want to see. You no longer react. You no longer cry. You no longer try to understand or hope they'll finally get it. Because you get it now. And that is enough. From now on, every time you say no, it's not just a rejection of others. It's a declaration to yourself, I choose me. Every boundary you set is a golden thread weaving your soul back together. Every time you remain silent in the face of manipulation, it is not submission. It is a refusal to give power to those who do not deserve it. You don't need revenge. Your freedom is the greatest punishment for those who once tried to cage you. The peace you live in now, peace no longer conditional on anyone's behavior, is something they will never possess. And you don't need them to, because you're not here to fix anyone. You're here to shine. True freedom doesn't begin when you walk away from the narcissist. It begins when you walk away from the need to be understood by them. Because empaths have spent years trying to explain, to express, to get someone to see their heart. But with a manipulator, truth has no place. In their world, logic is a weapon, emotion is a blade, and you are just a source of reaction. So true liberation does not lie in the final words you longed to say. It lies in the silence you chose to keep. A silence that is no longer surrender, but a declaration. You no longer need them to understand, because you understand yourself. You no longer need their validation because your worth no longer lives in the eyes of someone who can't see your soul. From that point forward, you begin living a new life. Not flashy, not loud, but fully sovereign. You no longer seek closure in their apologies. You find closure in your decision to never go back. You no longer try to heal others as a way to forget yourself. Now, you tend to yourself like a soul garden, uprooting the old toxic roots, the accusations you once believed were true, the dreams built on lies, the hopes that were nothing more than traps wrapped in sugar. And you replant with truth, with self-respect, with unconditional love for yourself. And from there, everything changes. You no longer feel lonely because you're not being loved. You feel peaceful because you've stopped loving the wrong person. You no longer feel empty from being forgotten. You feel full because you've stopped forgetting yourself. You no longer cry over the loss of a relationship. You feel grateful because that relationship led you to the most sacred one of all, the relationship with yourself. This strength wasn't born with you. It was forged in every moment you were hurt, but still chose to rise in every silence you endured, while still choosing to remain kind in every limit you were pushed to, and still you refused to abandon yourself. And if you're still listening to these words, it reveals a profound truth. You are ready. Ready to look back, not to hold on, but to let go. Because awakening doesn't arrive in grand moments. It arrives in silence. In those nights you sit alone, no longer crying, but also no longer needing anyone to wipe your tears. It comes when you stop seeking validation from the one who hurt you. When you stop trying to understand one more time, and instead accept that their leaving was the answer. You once thought you needed closure, but the truth is, closure doesn't come from them. It comes when you decide to stop handing over the power to define you to someone who never knew how to love. It comes when you realize you don't need a perfect ending to begin a new chapter. You just need to put it down and walk away, even if your hands still tremble, even if your heart still remembers. Because rebirth doesn't begin with a smile. It begins with that one moment you choose yourself amid the 1,000 urges to go back. One moment you say no and don't explain why. One moment you look into the mirror and no longer see someone who failed, but a warrior who survived the storm. You've come far enough to know you don't need anyone to come back and admit they were wrong. You just need you to stay, and to never abandon yourself again. And if your journey is just beginning or you're taking your first uncertain steps, remember this. You are not alone. Here in every video, every word we share, we don't tell stories to make you afraid. We tell them, so you remember, you have a right to be real, a right to be at peace, and a right to be loved. Right. If these words stir something inside you, if you find pieces of yourself in the quiet pauses, hit subscribe today. Because the journey of healing was never meant to be walked alone. And here you'll find light, not from us, but reflected from within you. Let your next chapter begin with one small choice. Choose to follow. Choose to awaken. Choose yourself. We'll see you in the next video where we will continue to unearth what was once buried and together transform pain into wisdom, silence into power, and separation into a magnificent beginning.